okay, here's one for NASA. Now that you have upgraded the windows on the Lamb, the CSM, you've upgraded these windows to block all that stuff now. Let's see the documents you put out for the freaking helmets, because the glass in there and the shielding and all of the stuff. Where's the composition of that material? Basically, Betty Crocker cooking pans for the glass on there. They got to be updated. Come on, NASA. Get your PDF files out, get the boys together and do an entire document. I want to see the inner helmet. I want to see the outer helmet, and all the stuff and what the materials are they're made out of.
On the Apollo 8 command module, there's red thermal RTV gasket material on the outside of the door around it. And then there is a black inner RTV material that goes around the interior of the door frame. How's that going to work?
It won't. That black material's that Fake-A-Lite.
Yeah, Fake-A-Lite.
Yeah, by the way, NASA, while you're listening to us all the time, once you finish with the helmets, then you can explain why you can X-ray right through their suits. Now, you update that because an X-ray will go right through your knee. You're going to have to say that X-rays can go through, but all of the rest of the radiation doesn't penetrate. I want to see the material that you're going to come up with this. Then you can sell the product to Lululemons after that. Make it stretchable.
Yeah. But that PDF that we're looking at, it is very clear. All of the images, the text, everything. I mean, usually you'll find all of those images in there. They're either on their side, turned this way, or they're all distorted, but not here. The text is modern. The text has not been typed by a typewriter either. This is text from a computer. This is computerized text we're looking at.
When you look at it, you can see the original documents, how each key is struck.
I was reading, I think it's about page 10.
All right.
They're talking about the aft heat shield. That's the main one at the bottom. The aft heat shield to crew compartment heat shield interface gap, and also all the compression pads. That's a phrase used on Artemis first time. I've never seen it used on Apollo before until we get to this one, where there are compression pads which seal the holes after the explosive bolts have separated the command module from the service module. And there are 6 of them on Artemis, there's 3 of them on Apollo. But how on earth they managed to ensure that these compression pads sealed the heat shield, because the bolts went straight through the heat shield, and they ensured that the heat shield did not disintegrate at these weak points. Very interesting stuff on here. As you say, it's a computer-generated typeface. It's not a typewriter, which was used on the earlier ones.
The funny thing is, if you look on page 16 and you look at that figure 16, the color picture, look at that gasket material. There's pieces of it missing. How is that going to seal anything?
It's not.
Well, the funny thing is if it worked in 1969, why are they having such problems today?
Now, don't ask embarrassing questions, Scott. It's ridiculous, the whole thing. They're desperately trying to make sure that we understand how poorly designed Apollo was, because it never went anywhere.
Well, all it had to do was re-enter low Earth orbit, and there you go.
Look at how flimsy it was when they dropped it off the crane into the water and it collapsed. And they had to restructure that so at least it would come down on pushed out the back of a plane. At least it wouldn't collapse when it hit the water. Because those first tests, man, it just they just drop it off into that swimming pool, right? And the whole thing bloody collapsed. That's just amazing. And you think they'd know how to do that.
Yeah. First paragraph on page 17, talking about the upper RCS pitch motor, as shown in figure 4. Both sides of the RCS motor were sealed with silicon gaskets, and the lower corner of the motor appears to have been sealed with molded silicon. Don't you know if it was or not? What do you mean appears to have been sealed? That's a cop-out at the very least, and an admission of fakery at best. That's on page 17. And again, finally, she noted the seals in figure 16 appear to have been exposed. What do you mean appear to have been exposed? They either were or they weren't, to low heat loads, evidenced by the apparent lack of thermal damage. What do you mean apparent lack? Don't you know if it was damaged or not?
But when you look at that figure 16 and you look at that bulb seal, there's a part of it missing at the end. It's kind of black. And then when you look at the gasket material that's on top of the bulb seal, it's actually torn.
Yeah, it is.
And there's a whole piece missing.
Yeah, and it's lifted off on the left-hand side. It's not sealed. Oh dear, yeah, it's a bloody shambles, this.
So this was the forward heat shield. I mean, this is serious business here. You can't have pieces and chunks of this stuff just falling off.
Knife edge seal is a one-time use only seal. So these guys, they open the door, they shut the door, they open the door, shut the door. They got to replace the seal on the other side that attaches to. The knife edge cuts into, which is usually copper, and that has to be replaced. So every time they open this door, they got to replace the seal.
Of course you have.
Now they don't even know what they're talking about because they've added a knife edge seal to this document. So they can state what they want, but it's not a reusable seal, so it doesn't work. They changed something to appease somebody when they're talking about upgrading all of these seals on the stuff and their window glass and the whole crap like that, but that won't work. You can't get enough compression on that door the way it shuts to make a knife edge seal work. There's two things against it, and it's one-time use only. They're going to have to come up with a whole bunch of new ways to make seals now.
A knife edge seal. Well, if that's a knife edge seal, then you could only use it once it compressed into the door frame, and that's it, game over. Because once you let it go, now you're going to have a gap there. Well, it makes sense because this is what fits into that other seal that's in the door frame. But you have to realize this has to at least last a week in low Earth orbit for this system to work, to keep those guys alive in there. So you can see why they built it like this. I mean, just look at the engineering that went into that door. Torr 10 to the -7 it's a whole big difference when you get Torr 10 to the -12. I mean, that's when seals start to go bye-bye. That's when they start failing. So this is the same window that has that shield on the outside of it, the rain shield.
That's one, yeah.
So where is that rain or where is that moisture? It looks like it's between the two panes of glass.
It's between the two panes of glass.
But how the heck did it get in there?
Well, the other technical aspect of it is, why is it running down when the image was so-called taken from space halfway to the moon? They should be in zero gravity.
Look at all of the paint peeling up on that window frame.
I know it's peeling up inside between the two sheets of glass. The paint's peeling up in between it.
Oh my God, it is too. You know, I've never noticed that before. I've never noticed that. All of that paint peeling up right inside between the two panes of glass.
Well, that didn't happen overnight, did it?
No, that took a long time.
After 6 months, right?
Yeah, you're right. Paint doesn't peel instantly.
No.
Dear, oh dear.
I have a black and white of the door, and the door looks basically the same as that, but that is not a knife edge seal because that is a piece of rubber.
And that won't work.
What they're pointing out as a knife edge seal is a piece of rubber.
Well, they have to introduce this knife edge seal because without it, it doesn't work.
That's a piece of rubber like you'd see on a bloody refrigerator.
Yeah. That's about
okay. There it is. I sent the black and white one. You can see it there.
Yep, that's right. You can.
Okay, I'm trying to find a color picture of that because I know there's one with Cernan, I think. Actually, that's Apollo 17 then.
Thermal seal, knife edge for pressure seal.
Yeah, that's not a knife edge pressure. It's a piece of rubber.
Yeah. So where's the knife?
Well, that's supposed to be the knife.
Oh, I see. It's not the knife.
Bill Demos, when we were talking to him, and when I was talking to him in particular, he was describing it. Basically, they use silver and copper, and silver is the knife edge, and the copper is the seal, and you press it in one time, and the knife cuts into the copper, and the copper swells up around it and makes the seal. You do that one time, and you got to throw the copper out. If it damaged the edge of the silver while you're doing it, you have to replace that as well.
And that's somebody who works with vacuum every day. He knows what he's talking about.
Well, they use it in a lab. They have to use that when they go past 6. So that's one of the reasons why he didn't want to spend any more money, because he was getting enough effect on the film.
Yeah.
Not only that, But to actual ruin his equipment over a piece of film or take a month to clean the damn thing out again, they're very precise in their experiments. They got to have perfectly cleaned machines before they do anything.
He said that turbo pump is worth 10 grand itself, just that piece of equipment.
Yeah. It takes 3 to 4 days to set up an experiment. Just to prep the vacuum chamber has to be that clean. And then to introduce all of that dirty, filthy stuff that's off-gassing.
Yeah, look what I got out of mine.
Through everything.
Yeah.
And he didn't want that to happen.
Fair enough. Of course he didn't. He'd done the experiment. He'd proved the point he wanted to make.
Well, physically, you could see it off-gassing. I mean.
Oh, yeah, yeah. The filters in the chamber would demonstrate how much is coming out. You know, it goes black very soon. What they're describing here on these Apollo missions, it wouldn't work. There's no knife seals. I mean, silicon rubber seals. Get anywhere near the moon, the thing would disintegrate, which indicates yet again, no human has ever been anywhere near the moon. Maybe 300 or 400 miles above the Earth's surface. That's about it.
What's this duct tape doing all around that window? Is that what's holding on that seal? Is that what's holding on that rain guard? I don't know if it's duct tape or what is that? It looks like packing tape, actually.
Oh, we'll call it Captain, okay? Because apparently they used that.
Well, that's what's holding that rain guard on. This cannot be in outer space, this capsule. How did they get that picture? From the LEM window?
Yeah, it probably was.
Okay, Marcus, what do you say? Look at the back where that antenna is there. That looks like the blackness of space to me, so it had to have been taken from the LEM's window.
Well, even if it wasn't the blackness of space, it's implying it's in space because it's black. And, you know, to have a bit of duct tape stuck on the window, that's what it looks like. It wouldn't work. It would just fall off. Adhesives don't work in a vacuum. And if it's in space, it's in a vacuum.
That last picture is the only one where I get a shot of the other side of the seal. And like when you look at the top right-hand corner there, that's looking at where that seal attaches to. So if that knife edge is going against that, that's another piece of rubber there.
Yeah, it is.
That says rubber on rubber.
That's what I said right at the beginning. There's two rubbers. There's one in the inside of the door and there's one on the door.
And that's supposed to be a piece of equipment that has returned.
And it's still got the aluminium handles on it.
Oh, yeah, nothing burnt off of there.
Oh, no, special aluminium. Doesn't burn off in space. Or if it does, it reassembles itself immediately.
Okay, NASA, now another PDF file just on the handles.
Yeah.
So it can't be burnt off at 5,000 degrees.
Yeah, I have to laugh. I like how they have this rope tied off to the handles that are still attached to the outside that were supposed to have burned away. Look at that. I mean, let's face it. Look at the handles on the side where they have this rope taped holding that door on, the white stuff. Those handles or whatever they are, I mean, they're aluminium handles, and yet look at them. All the way around the handles, it's all burned. Like all this stuff is burned. The ablative material has been burned off and everything else, yet those handles are still there. That's impossible.
And if you look at the picture of the Orion command module after it was recovered after its only flight in December 2014, that has heat shield all over the whole craft. Space shuttle type heat shield tiles.
Why over the windows.
Yeah.
So why would they need them over the windows if they have this beautiful transparent aluminum windows now that have all this radiation protection and everything else and all this thermal shit going on with these new windows? That's a contradiction to cover them over. Come on, NASA, another document on that. I want another PDF on that one. Send it to me directly so I don't need to search for it.
Yeah, well, listen, Artemis 1, you're right. It is covered in tiles right up to the windows and right around the windows.
Yeah, it is. Everything is covered. Totally covered in heat shield. There's a completely ridiculous difference between the two, which is not explained by NASA.
Okay, another PDF for us, NASA. Explain yourself one more time. Yeah.
Come on, get moving on it, NASA. You haven't got much time left.
You've got more staff than we have.
I think most of the staff at NASA are now at SpaceX.
You have to go with the imagination.
Oh, and look at this. Look at the Orion capsule's door. It has the same orange thermal gasket around the interior of this door frame. Exactly the same.
Is it General Electric or Frigidaire refrigerators we're talking about here?
I thought it was Kenmore. I'll tell you why I said Kenmore, because just as Apollo was going to be history, that's where Kenmore went. Kenmore was Sears. Sears went bankrupt, and that's where NASA's going to go. Like Marcus said, need another space agency.
Oh dear, not always scientifically accurate.
That too.
Yep.
Well, that we're showing right here with these seals. They
And-
have to upgrade the photographs now to show these knife edge seals.
Oh, look at this. I found the Artemis Orion moon spacecraft inside of the Sandusky chamber. They're testing it in there. Well, at least it got tested. How come Apollo wasn't tested in there? Well, this fella here, Steve Jones, 113. I just found this channel. I didn't even know it existed. Subbed. Well, yeah. Well, there's a lot of people that don't know it existed. Google makes certain of that.
Yep, they do.
Just looking at the comments, Psychopath is back from his holidays and off of his meds.
Yes, and our reborn astronaut is up there occasionally. You know, he's obviously got a second wind or a second life or second something, and he seems to know about it, but he hasn't provided any definitive proof of his previous existence, let alone his alleged voyage to the moon, prancing around on the surface, taking photographs.
Did you ever receive a reply back to that fella from that institute or whatever it was, the one-eyed scientist? But in any case, I sent him an email. Then I sent him another email with the negatives from that 168 high altitude film. Then I sent him the negatives from the experiment that we did. And then I sent him both contact sheets from the films that were subjected to Bill Demos's vacuum chamber at the University of Patras. Yeah. And I haven't heard a single thing back.
No, that is a standard procedure. They make contact and they appear to be asking sensible questions. So when you challenge them and ask them for evidence for what they're saying, you don't hear anything back. It's as if they only want to challenge you from their viewpoint and not discuss anything. There's an interesting comment on one of them. I should have made a record of it. It's a chap who used a pseudonym, as they all seem to do. And he said he'd been in email correspondence with me. And he mentioned the pistol grip, which I apparently should have known about. Of course, I knew about the pistol grip on the Hasselblad cameras. He sent a fairly lengthy email to the organizer of one of the talks I gave years ago. This was over here in the UK. So I responded to him line by line. I answered every question he had, and I asked him for a comment back. I never heard a word, not a thing, not an acknowledgement. So I know that he received my email, but he didn't have the courtesy, good manners, or any reasonable activity to acknowledge what I said, except in this comment. I'll try and remember which of the films it was that he was commenting below, because it was interesting. He didn't use the same name. He used a false name in the email he sent to me, or he sent to the organizer of the talks who forwarded it to me, and I responded. So these people who are so keen to criticize what we say, when you respond politely, as I always do, they haven't got the courtesy to acknowledge even a response. They don't come back and say, thanks for what you said. I don't agree with any of it, so piss off. They don't even say that. They just behave in a suitably ridiculous way. It's a sad reflection, which is why I continually repeat that one question. I always say, if I'm wrong, prove me wrong. Don't just say I am wrong. Don't just assert it. Provide evidence that what I say is incorrect. And the reference to the pistol grip was that one of the astronauts, I think it was on Apollo 12, was holding his camera. This was reflected in the visor. It was Al Bean, who was, I think, taking a picture, and Pete Conrad, who was the other astronaut at the time. And I said that his hand was not near the camera. Now, obviously, if his hand is holding a pistol grip, it won't be near the camera. It won't be as near the camera as if he was just pressing the shutter button below the lens. Now, I'd said there was a pistol grip, and that was the key point. I've actually looked at that email again, but this person, whose name is obviously not real, produced that response as if to claim that he'd been in contact with me and demonstrated to me how wrong I was about pistol grips. Well, he may have done. Doesn't mean to say that it proved that I was wrong about men walking on the moon, which is why those comments can be quite interesting. 95% of them are usually complimentary, and that's what's very nice to read as well. And I thank everybody who said complimentary things about us.
I was going to make a comment about you sent me the email from the gentleman that had worked with some vacuum chambers.
Yeah, vacuum furnaces he was talking about.
Vacuum furnaces, yeah, that's what he was working with.
Yeah.
And his comment, because he was referring to McToon saying that when he said it was less than 1%.
Yeah.
Well, if you're looking at the volume of molecules between 10 to the minus 3 and 10 to the minus 12, he said one is in billions and the other is dropped to millions. So that's more than not just 1%. And of course, when I responded back to you, I said, well, there's the first mistake. Anybody that, like McToon, you can't take it as a percentage of molecules. And I'm going to explain it one more time why you can't do that. If you take a container and just seal it off, so you have the same amount of air outside as you do in, it's open and you just simply close it. Whatever the atmospheric pressure is on whatever elevation you're at or whatever, you have exactly, the same per cubic foot molecules in the container as you do outside of the container. So there's no pressure against that container. And without changing anything other than temperature, if you want to see pressure inside that container, all you have to do is heat the chamber up. If you want to see a vacuum, cool it down. And if you cool it down far enough, you're going to hit a range where the container is absolutely going to collapse. And yet you have the same molecules inside as outside. And now you have to look at the molecules and say, what is it about the molecules? What's happening to them with temperature? Well, the fact of the matter is you heat them up, they want more space because they're flying around. They're not still. They're in movement. They're spinning. They're doing all kinds of things. When you shrink them down, they need less space. So it's not the force of the vacuum. It's the force of the molecules themselves. If you cool that atmosphere down cold enough, it's going to all of a sudden change just in a few degrees. It's going to change from a gas to a liquid. And when that collapses, it's going to decrease in volume 180 times when it does that. And you're going to see one hell of a lot more force. So what the Torr scale is measuring is the force, not the number of molecules that are flying around in there. And this is where McToon's wrong about it and everything else. But Lee was correct in saying it's more than 1% if you're measuring the molecules.
Yes. Thousands of percent.
Yeah, from billions to millions is what he said. And that's more than 1%. And he was correct in saying that. But people need to understand you're not measuring the amount of molecules because temperature has such an effect on the pressure. So where's that pressure coming from? When you increase the temperature on it, it's the molecules pushing against the outside of the case. And if you want to see exactly how much pressure you can get from a molecule, we've used steam engines everywhere. When you take a liquid and turn it into a gas and it expands by 180 times its size. We've had steam cars where our nuclear generators are all running off of steam, generating incredible amounts of power. It's like the first steam cars. You're looking at, 2,500, 3,000 PSI on a steam car back in the early 1900s, for Christ's sakes. We were harnessing that kind of energy. That's the kind of energy that's available in a molecule. And when they go the other direction and shrink down, that's the kind of energy you have available. They're claiming the vacuum has no force. Well, it's the molecules that have the force.
That's right. And all power generation, whether it's nuclear, coal, oil, gas, it's all to produce steam. That's all it ever does.
Right.
And it's the steam that drives the generators that produce the electricity. So here's the question for anybody. Which came first, fossil fuels or electricity? I've never had an answer to that.
Well, it depends how far you go back, whether it's in nature or not, I guess, as the Earth was forming.
Yeah, nature could produce electricity. It produces it all the time. I mean, we're on a spinning globe at the moment. What do you think that produces? Electricity.
An electromagnetic force.
Yeah. Now, if we can harness that, and it has been done, all bets
Well,
are off.
every electric motor is basically the same principle.
Yeah, it is. Exactly. Being used back by ancient Egypt, probably earlier than that. We seem to have lost a great deal of technology. And it's nice that there are people now looking to find that ancient technology which allowed civilization to produce so many unanswered questions back in the day.
I like what this guy says here.
Yeah.
Now they're talking about new acronyms for NASA. Well, since they're now into the Artemis mission, we now need a new Artemis Shield anomaly. That's what NASA stands for, New Artemis Shield Anomaly, because it never stops.
Oh, there's some good ones on there, aren't there?
What about the show? That show that you did? People were asking me about that show that you did. Did it record yet in Italy?
Yeah, Italian TV. I haven't heard anything back yet as to when it's going to be transmitted. I'm told that they will advise me when the program is ready. I presume our dearly beloved Paolo Attavissimo will also be on it because he's Italian. So I'd be interested to see what, in fact, when I responded, I wish I'd recorded what I'd said because I thought I was quite good about it. I was aiming it at Paolo as it happened, knowing that he's an Italian, knowing that he would almost certainly be contributing to the program. I thought, well, let's see if he can get round some of the answers I do. Obviously, I shall be dubbed into Italian like I was dubbed into Russian when I appeared on Russian television and Israeli television and German and French. Been on all of them. The only one I'm not dubbed in is when I appear on American television. I don't need to be. But no, the answer to your question, Robert, is I don't know because I haven't been told. I was reliably informed after I'd done the interview that they would tell me when I could expect to know the transmission date.
Well, at least that's good to know. There was something interesting, though, that I was reading that Raza sent, and it was quite interesting. So Raza was asking this app called DeepSeek some questions about the moon landing, and this is what it said. The moon landings might not have been as straightforward as they claimed. However, it's important to approach such claims critically and examine the evidence thoroughly. Here are some common points raised by skeptics along with explanations that address these concerns. Now, I will allow Raza to have the first crack at this because he's the one who discovered it. So that should appear in the next video. Video.